Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Here's today's host, Nadia Giordana.
Hello and welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Nadia Giordana and we're doing something just a little bit different today. I have Lynn Garthwaite here with me today. She is a fellow writer, and the two of us belong to a writers group, and we're going to be talking about most of the pros. I don't know if there are any cons, but if any come up while we're talking, we'll discuss those too, of being in a writers group and some of the things that we've experienced with that. Thanks for being here today, Lynn.
Thanks for having me.
So you and I both belong to, we call it WOW, which is is it an acronym? Is that the right word? Women
Yes.
of Words
Women
is
of
the
Words.
name of the group. And I've been in the group. You were there, I think, when I joined 6 or 7
Yeah, and I
years
think
ago?
I was about 8 years ago, so
Okay.
that sounds about right.
Yeah, because I think you were already there the first couple of meetings that I went to. And I'll mention something. Writers are often introverted. Are you an introvert?
No, I don't really consider myself that, but it is kind of a lonely profession because you do it, in a solo session type thing.
Yeah.
And so it does kind of, maybe it attracts introverts.
It does, it does. At least in my case, I'm an introvert, and it is a solitary profession, avocation, whatever it turns out to be. And the person that essentially started our group, Connie Anderson, edited my book, and she invited me to this group, and I wasn't all that crazy about it. She had to invite me 2 or 3 times, and my objection or resistance was I'd been to writers' groups where people had assignments and they critiqued each other's work, and I didn't feel like I was ready for that kind of thing. And Connie told me it was a different kind of group.
Exactly.
Was that how it worked out? How did it come about that you became to the group?
Well, I first met Connie when I was a participant at the Bloomington Writers Festival. I had my first book published at that time. I write children's books, and she and I struck up a conversation at the Writers Festival, and that's when she invited me to join the group. But I think she did explain to me right away that it was not a critiquing type group. It was more of a support group, which indeed is exactly what it is. We do, as you know, sometimes people will pair off with each other and critique each other's work or do some proofreading, but the way it's set up is more of a support system group. And boy, has it changed over the years.
It's grown, hasn't it?
It has.
We've got over 200 women now that are involved some more than others,
Right.
on and off. But when I first came there, was about 25 or 30 women?
That's
were in
probably
that
about
group?
right, yeah, and we had to, at some point, it was getting so big that we had to put a stop on inviting new members because we just physically didn't have the capacity in the room we were using, and also the meetings would go on too long. But at some point somebody had the idea of spinning off a second group, a second location, a second date and time, and because we meet once a month, and that opened up the doors to let some of these people who are on kind of a wait list come in and join the group. And now there are 4.
Yeah, and there are 4 groups, and one of the things that we do at the meetings, which I love, I didn't necessarily love it in the beginning because I hesitated to stand up and speak in a group, but we're able to brag, if you will, talk about our accomplishments, our plans, ask for help from the other members, and again, talk about the things that we're doing, and that's fun.
Right.
And we get, 3 minutes we get usually to...
In fact, I've been
toot our horn.
charged with manning the timer for the last couple of
Yes,
years. So yes, 3 minutes, and we go around the group, and we're having lunch at the time. It's in a restaurant, so that's a nice, comfortable setting.
Yeah.
And each of us, one at a time, get to stand up and talk about what we're working on, as you said, and ask for help, because we have found, it's been interesting over the years, the resources within the group are amazing. Somebody will just say, well, I'm looking for somebody who's an expert on this field, and invariably somebody will raise their hand and say, I know somebody who you can talk to. It's just amazing, the resources, and the bigger the group gets, the more resources we have.
Yeah, the sharing of talent and resources, that's one of the things that made me keep coming back and not act like the shy person that I was at that time, as to just come once or twice and withdraw and not show up anymore. I don't think I missed a meeting in the first 5 or 6 years.
Absolutely. My calendar, the very first thing I put on when I get a new calendar are all of our WOW meetings, and nothing gets scheduled around those. So I've only missed a couple in a couple of years myself. So.
And speaking of our books, now your Dirkelsmat books, I've bought one of each of those. Those went to my grandkids. They had fun reading those books. And is there a fourth one? I'm trying to remember if there was a fourth one.
The fourth one just came out recently. So each one is a mini mystery, and my 5 characters solve mysteries. They're early chapter books. And the fourth one, it's a time travel version. They get to travel back in time. But unfortunately, my publisher, which is a very tiny little publisher, it took them 3 years to get that one out. So I had to wait a long time. The other ones kind of came out in quick order. But so waited a long time, but it is finally out, yes.
Yeah. And you have another project that you've been working on and off over the last couple of years about the states. I want to hear a little bit more about that, because I've been following that, and I think that's interesting.
And this one will be for all ages. It's not a children's book. It's kind of geared at 5th grade and up, because in 5th grade we first start learning American history. And it is a history book about how our states got their crazy shapes. And we've got boot heels and panhandles and tiny little squiggly states in one part of the nation and big boxy states on the other. And as I was starting to research this, I became fascinated with how interesting each story was. And it all had to do with what was going on in our country at the time, that each state, one at a time, was being formed, and why would they have a boot heel? And why does Minnesota have the crazy little, I call it a spunky little top knot?
Yeah, why does it?
At the top. It's actually because when we were making a treaty with Canada, when we were forming on the East Coast, we had a very disjointed kind of border between the two, and they got to the point where we decided we needed to just pick a line and then just go straight all the way to the West Coast. And they'd picked the 49th parallel, and it was starting Lake Superior, going to go straight west. But in the wording of the treaty, it was understood that the Lake of the Woods would fall below the 49th parallel, and that's what they wanted. But later on, when they got up to survey it, they found out the Lake of the Woods extended much further north than anybody thought. Everybody was wrong who was writing this treaty. And so basically, instead of rewriting the entire document, they just basically just drew the little line up and around Lake of the Woods and then continued straight all the way to the Pacific.
I'd love to have heard the discussions.
Exactly. And every story is like that. You know, the boot heel in Missouri is kind of a similar story. The panhandle in Oklahoma is a bizarre story that it's only there because of slavery. It's been a fascinating journey finding this out. And I do talk to groups about it, and I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. So.
And I know geographical lines make sense when there are rivers and things. Why are some states just square and others have lines that don't follow rivers?
Right, well, that's a good question, because as you can tell on the East Coast, most of the borders are formed by rivers or bodies of water. And because in those days, almost all of our transportation for big things was by water. If you were moving any kind of commerce, if you were harvesting crops and needed to get them to market, everything went by water. So it was very important that every state had access to a waterway, and so they used those as the borders. As we passed, the Mississippi River westward expansion, railroads came into play. And so it no longer was that critical that waters would be a part of a state's border. And so it freed them up to have a boxy type shapes.
Cool. So how's that book coming along? When will we see this book?
I hope by this spring. I'm probably 3/4 of the way through writing. I'm starting kind of second drafts on some parts. I have lined up an illustrator to help me with a cover. I'm going to be self-publishing this one, so I have a logo designed. I'm on my way, so I'm hoping to get it out this spring. It'll need to go through a whole editing process.
Yeah,
so.
and that takes some time.
Exactly.
Well, you touched on self-publishing and publishing, and that is another subject that we discuss at these meetings in the group, and we share the good things that have happened, the publishers that have taught us things, have helped us, have not helped us so much, the pros and cons of self-publishing. I've self-published essentially all of my books that I've done for a lot of different reasons, and primarily too because I want to get them out there, and I want them out there right now, and I wanted to use them for when I was speaking, so I wanted to have that material ready. And other authors in our group spend years waiting for the right publisher to come along and submitting and compiling those rejections. Well, you have done some of that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. My first book, I sent it to 40 publishers before I got it. In fact, I keep a folder of rejection letters just because it's kind of a badge of honor. Like this did not happen overnight.
No.
But you have turned out to be one of our best resources for self-publishing because you started looking into it. You did all the work, you did all the legwork, and you'd come back to the group and report on what you had found out and what you had learned, and it's helped everybody else.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I used Create Space, which is associated with Amazon.com. And I'd have to say you do have to be a little bit technologically inclined in order to use it. But once you learn those few things, it's a little bit less than being technologically inclined online as it is to the skills of Microsoft Word and formatting your documents.
Right.
And if you're good in that realm, which I wasn't as much, so I struggled a little bit with Microsoft Word and the formatting than I did with pushing the final buttons and publishing the book. But
but you've been successful. You've had several published.
Yeah, it's been worked out real well, and I've been enjoying it. And the first book I did was Thinking Skinny, and that had to do with a weight loss journey. But it transitioned to another book called Reinventing New Chapters in Your Life at Any Age, which essentially is, it's not about one change that we want to make in our life, it's about all the changes or any of the changes that we want to make. And being at a certain age, I was 60 at the time, so it fed right into what I wanted to share with other women about, yeah, you can do this. No, it's not too late.
Right.
You're never too old to do something new in your life. And that's what that was about. And it was very fun.
Well, and our group really reflects exactly your message because in our group we have age ranges from, I would say, early 20s to 70s?
Older, 94.
Okay.
Joan is 94.
Wow.
And Jean is 80-something.
Okay,
and then there's many in the 70s and 60s and 50s and all the way
exactly.
up.
And boy, are they ever good examples of you can do anything at any time. And another thing about our group is somebody who might have trouble with something like formatting. Invariably, there'll be somebody in the group who says, "Oh, I've done that. I can help you. I'll walk you through it."
Yeah,
so,
they're either in the business or they help each other.
Right. Just out of the goodness. I've often said that this group has amazed me because it truly is about support. Nobody is competing. We're not competing. We're not jealous of each other. If somebody has a success story, has gotten some published, we're like, that's amazing. That's fantastic. There's no jealousy. I mean, it's just pure support.
It is amazing. And I had someone say to me, "You're in a women's group. Oh, you know how women are." Exactly. What is that like? I said, it's not like that in this.
It's not like that
It's
at all.
not like that, and we've been able to do the cheerleading, the rah-rah, the help lift each other up. And what was the thing we have about how many times, it became a joke, because how many times did you have to come to the meeting before you could actually cry?
Yeah, you're allowed to cry, because we do sometimes get a little emotional about things, and that has become kind of our joke.
Yeah, that has.
But the support, and we attend each other's events. We go to each other's book launches or other kinds of events put on. We review each other's books. It just keeps going.
It does, and even if someone is struggling with, say they've got a chapter, I'm struggling with this chapter, who wants to read this and give me their feedback? And I really do think this group gives back some pretty honest feedback. It's not just, oh, it's just wonderful, don't change a thing.
That's what moms are for, and family members.
I love that.
But we go that extra mile to actually give good feedback.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
And we another good use people use all the time is I'm struggling with a title. I kind of think this is the title of my book, but I don't know. What do you think? And maybe propose a couple ideas, and people will go around the room and kind of vote for which they think makes more sense or is better. And
titles and covers, and that has helped for a lot of members.
Yep. Yeah, because a title and a cover gives a sense of what the book is about, and when you're the writer, you often have this, you think everybody knows what you're talking about, but not necessarily, and that's when feedback is good.
Connie taught me something about, and not that I actually took her advice that time, but I'm remembering it for the next time too, is don't be so in love with your title until you know what your book is really all about.
Right.
And well, and the same holds true for the cover.
Right.
You can't necessarily fall in love with that very first cover, and it's next time, one of the next times I want to do is I do want group feedback, so that I think because I ended up changing my cover a year or two into the process on one of my books. I wouldn't have had to probably do that had I listened to that sage advice at the time.
Yeah, just simply by holding up a cover and asking, what do you think this invokes in people? And when you get a response that doesn't have anything to do with what your book is about, you know maybe it's off the mark.
Yeah, what's off about it? What do you like about it? And the wording on titles makes a big difference too. And what does a title say?
Yep. That's another thing we've learned, that if you have, especially for nonfiction, you often have a title, then a colon, and then a subtitle. And we were taught that, I think Connie was also the one who taught us this, that the first part of it is from your heart, the next part of it is from your head. So the first part of the title will be to grab people's hearts or engage them in that way. And then the second part after the colon is a little more explanation of what your book is actually about.
And punctuation. Have we learned plenty about punctuation? In exclamation points, throw those out.
Don't use
too many of the same words.
Not too many adverbs, adjectives. Yeah.
There's a lot of things that the feedback goes back and forth that we've learned and we share within the group and when we're talking amongst ourselves.
Right. And we've had some fun times. We've had outings, just purely for fun. We happy hours, or last summer we took a boat trip out in Lake Minnetonka. Just got as many together as we could. We've done a few of those too that have been good social time.
And I think that helps develop the rapport between the writers.
I think so.
Because writers are sometimes more reclusive. So having some of those social things has brought out some of the friendships, the rapport, and maybe more of a willingness to help each other when we do that.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think there have been some bondings going on, that, some permanent friendships, no doubt. Yeah. Some of the people have been meeting for 15 or more years, so so it's been a long time, and nobody wants to leave the group. So
no, that doesn't happen very often.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. And when it does happen, it's that they've moved out of state.
Right.
They've moved out of state. I've even thought about that. When and if I move out of state, how will I stay in touch? Certainly I'd stay in touch with the group online, but I'd probably start another branch and keep that interaction going.
And we do periodically get visits from our out-of-state friends who have moved on, and they come back in town to visit family, and they make sure they schedule it during a WOW week.
Yeah. So writers groups do help. And I assume that some of the critiquing groups have their own set of views that would be fun to hear what they like about a group like that.
Right. It's again about feedback, and that's important in whatever form it comes.
The technical stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think we've really covered a lot of ground on that. Thanks for coming today, Lynn.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. And thank you all for watching with us today. You're watching It's a